Hi everybody, this video will describe how to create a first-person point of view setup and gameplay within Unity. In the previous video we set up a third-person point of view gameplay, so I can move around. I can move with my cursor and hit WSD to move around. The character will kind of follow around. So this video will do the opposite approach, and we're going to set up a first-person point of view gameplay. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to come in here and turn off the active button for our third-person character and our third-person camera. So if you want to go back and review the previous video on third-person setup, I'm going to turn those off so those aren't going to be available, and the main camera does not have a Cinemachine camera to look for. Alright, so actually we can maybe copy and paste our our player geo in here. We're going to use that. We'll come back and copy and paste our ground check as well, so we can still jump and have gravity. So we'll still use this as our basis, but we're going to turn this off so that we don't see it in first person point of view, but we'll use that as our kind of height reference and character reference. So I'm using Cinemachine. If you don't have Cinemachine, you can go to Windows, Package Manager, let it search for the Unity registry and find Cinemachine. Find it in here. So Cinemachine is a subset of camera tools. So I'm going to create a virtual camera. For first person point of view, we don't want a follow or look at, we just want a Cinemachine camera. I'm going to reset the transforms, so put that back at the center. And I'll zoom in and we'll put this up here near the head of the character, somewhere like that. Okay, the geometry is going to be turned off in general, but when we get done. So let's go ahead and rename this first person camera. Okay. Alright, so similar to how we set up the third person character, we're going to create an empty game object, and we're just going to call that one first person character. And I'm going to temporarily parent this underneath the player geometry. So my character empty game object's underneath there. I'm just going to go ahead and do transform reset. That will center the object to the center of the character. It was already like that because I framed my camera up to the character. And then I'm going to drag the first person character object out. And then I'm going to parent the player geo underneath the first person character. And I'm also going to parent the camera under the first person character. Okay, so basically the first person character node will drive the motion of both the camera and the player geometry. So the first thing we want to add is the ability to be able to move the camera around with the mouse, the X and Y axis of the mouse. So let's add a new script. And in my scripts folder, the only script I have in here is the third person player movement script. So I'm going to go create C# script, and we'll call this one let's see, camera look first person. Okay, let's go to our camera, and we're gonna add that script to the camera, and this is the Cinemachine camera. Okay. Let's go ahead and open up that camera look script and add to that. Okay, so we're going to need a couple of variables, and the first variable is going to be a reference to the first person character empty game object, so the overall motion of what the character can do. Public transform, and we'll call this one player ref, maybe. That's fine. Okay, we're going to need a couple other variables here, so we're going to add a public float, and we'll do mouse sensitivity. Spell correct, sensitivity. And we're going to create a default value of 5F for that. That's probably going to be too high, but we'll change that later. So in a lot of first person point of view games, you have the option to increase or decrease the mouse sensitivity, so we can give that option here. Let's add another one. This one's just going to be a float, and we're going to call this one rotation, X rotation. So we'll do equals to 0F. So we're going to start with a 0 X rotation. So this is going to help with the vertical motion of the camera, and to be able to clamp it so that we don't allow the player to look past 180 degrees vertically or down at the character's feet. All right, so we'll come back to void start. We're going to do our main adjustments of void update. So we need input axes, so we're going to do a mouse X and a mouse Y. So we're going to do local variables. We're going to do float mouse X equals to. We'll come back to that one, and then we're going to do another one that says float mouse Y. Okay. So we need input. So for float mouse X, we're going to do input dot get axis, and we're going to do open parentheses, open quotation, and do mouse X. Okay, that's a preset one. And we're going to go back and reference our mouse sensitivity so we can change that if we want to have faster or slower mouse motion. So we're going to do times mouse sensitivity. Okay, and semicolon in that. And then for float mouse Y, we're going to do the same thing, mouse input, or equals input get axis. This one's going to be mouse Y this time. And we're going to do times mouse sensitivity. Okay, I'm going to turn down some. And so the next thing we're going to do is add the rotation. Then we'll come back and kind of clamp things down here. Okay, so let's do the horizontal translation or horizontal mouse motion first. So let's do transform dot local rotation equals, and we're going to do quaternion dot Euler, and we're going to open up parentheses, and we're looking for 3 values, X, Y, and Z. So the first is going to be our X rotation. I'm going to come back and make our adjustments to this in a minute. Actually, this is going to be the vertical axis, not the horizontal axis. So rotation, X rotation, comma 0F, comma 0F. Okay, we'll put a semicolon there. So, but we need to define X rotation. So let's go up above that. So above that, we're going to do X rotation minus or equals to mouse Y. We're going to do a semicolon. And then underneath that, we're going to clamp this so that the character can't rotate beyond 90 degrees vertically, going up or going down. So the vertical motion, we'll use the mouse Y input and store that in this X rotation variable. And then we're going to transform the local rotation so that the camera can rotate vertically up and down. All right, so then we're also going to add X rotation equals a clamp function that reduces the ability to rotate in certain angles. So if I do math f dot clamp, I'm going to open up our quotation again and do X rotation, comma, negative 90 f, comma, 90 f. And what that'll do is reduce the player's option to be able to rotate past looking completely vertically or up and then down. Okay, so underneath the transform, that's a vertical action. We need to do the mouse X action, which is side to side mouse motion. So we're going to get a reference to our player. So player ref dot rotate. In parentheses, we're going to do a vector 3 dot up times mouse X. And then close parentheses and semicolon. All right, so that's our script. We're going to Control S to save that. All right, so in Unity, we're going to go let it save, make sure we don't have any errors. All right, we're good. We're going to go to our camera, and we need a player ref reference here for the node. So we're going to drag our first person character object, which is that blank object, empty object, into the player ref. All right. So let's go test this out. So let's hit Control S to save, and let's go play. All right, so now I have the ability to be able to kind of look down and look up and look left and right. The character will actually follow with it as well, which is kind of what we want it to do. But I don't have the means to kind of rotate past 90 degrees. So if I look up to the sun, I don't have the means to rotate past that. And also I don't have the means to rotate past 9 degrees down. The character's body is in the way. But it limits the player's ability to be able to rotate around vertically, but I can still look around horizontally as much as I want. So that might be a little fast of mouse sensitivity, but that's why we create a variable for that, so I can lower that mouse sensitivity down to like 2 and then play again. And see how that looks? That's pretty good, a little slow. So maybe I can keep playing with that to maybe 4 and then see what individually I like to see have as far as a fast motion of the mouse according to what the camera does. We don't want the motion to be too fast for the player. Alright, so next thing to add is the movement. So we're going to add first person character movement through the use of a character controller. So if I go to the first person character empty object, and if I click add component, and we'll do character controller. Alright, so now we're going to add a new script, and this is going to be for the first person character movement. So we're going to call this one player movement first person. So first person, yeah, that's fine. Okay, oh, I already have one named this, so let's see if we can rename this. So I already have one called first person in the subfolder, so let's say first person A. There we go. Already contains, okay, well, okay, so I might need to remove this one out. And then I'll just create another one with a different name. Alright, so create first person player movement first person A. There you go. Alright, so let's go ahead and add that script to, make sure which one is which here. Yep, that one. Okay, first person A. Let's add that one to our first person character empty game object. And let's open that up and go add our functionality for the move. So let's start with our variables up at the top. So we're going to need a reference to that character controller, so public character controller. And we'll just call this one controller for a local variable. And then as always for movement we need a speed, so public float speed. And we will start with a 12F here. So this is going to be faster motion for first person than for third person. Alright, and void update is where we're going to start here. So if I go to void update, we need our 2 inputs for left, right, and then forward and backwards. So we're going to do a float move left, right. Then we'll return down, and we're going to do float move FB for front, back. So LR for left, right, FB for front, back. Input.get axis, and open up parentheses and quotations, and we're going to title horizontal. That's the horizontal motion A and D. And then move front back is going to be input.get axis, and this is going to be vertical. Alright, so that stores our inputs, Adobe ASD, the arrow keys, into 2 different variables, move L, R, and move FB. Okay, and then now we need to store our movement between those 3 and those 3 axes. So we're going to do vector 3, and we're going to call this one move. This is a new variable. Equals transform dot right times move LR plus transform dot forward times move FB. Alright, so the last line we need is to actually move the controller. So if I go controller.move, open up parentheses, move times speed times time dot delta time. There we go. Alright, so we take our move variable, which stores our inputs, X and Y, or left, right, up, down. And then we're going to times that by our speed variable, and then times time dot delta time. Alright, so let's hit Control S to save. Let's go in to Unity. We don't have any errors, so our speed is already set. We need a reference to our controller. So let's drag from our first person character the character controller component into the controller node here. All right, let's hit Control S to save. Let's hit play. All right, so we can still look around and we can move around now. Wherever I'm looking is moving forward as well. So we have motion. Now we need to go add gravity and the ability to jump. All right. So what we can do is actually reference what we created from our third-person game, our third-person movement. Let's open up a third-person script. In the previous video, we added a jump, and we added gravity and ground check. Okay, so we need a couple of these variables that we're going to copy over. So we're going to need our jump variable, and we'll add that underneath our public float speed. And then we're going to need, we don't need the turn smooth time because that's for 3D character movement, but we are going to need gravity, ground check, ground distance, and ground mask. So we'll add those underneath as well. Make sure everything's aligned. And then for the private ones, we need this velocity and is grounded. So I'm going to copy them over there and we'll talk about kind of what to do. And then we need this top section that focuses on is it grounded, and then if it's grounded, then to have the ability to jump, and then to add gravity to the object as well. So let's copy this section over as well. And this is going to be a void update. And we can put this above our movement actions. There we go. So the section down here will be our movement. We can maybe come in here and comment this out. Movement. And then we can say gravity and jump. Okay. So we can add more complex commenting here. But so we're going to get or create custom gravity and then the jump ability, jump value. So we're going to increase this to maybe let's say 6 for the first person point of view jump, make it look like it's jumping faster. Maybe 4. Let's try that. Maybe a little high. So we need a gravity, negative 9.8. We're going to manually create gravity. And then we're going to create a ground check object. We're going to copy that over from a third person point of view. And look if that ground check is colliding with a surface that has a layer of mass that's going to be called ground. And then this ground distance is the distance away from the ground check object that is going to check to see if the character is colliding with the surface. They're going to create Boolean true false, is the character grounded or not? And then this velocity is for the gravity, to increase the gravity. So in the void, we're going to check or set is grounded to true, as then if the physics create sphere is looking for a ground check and finding the collision with a 0.2 unit distance away from an object that has a layer mass that is associated with the ground, that's going to be true. And then our if statement, if the is grounded is true and velocity is less than 0, then we're going to set our velocity really to -2, but it's going to mean there's no velocity at all. And then the next if statement is our jump option. So if button down jump and is grounded is true, then we're going to use this math square root function to add the jump ability. Jump times -2.0f times gravity, which is -9.8. So that'll give us the ability to jump. And then we're going to add gravity. So velocity.y plus equals gravity times time.delta time. So that will pull the character down if the character is in the air and not currently colliding with anything. And then we're going to actually add that to the controller. So controller.move velocity times time.delta time. All right, so let's hit Control S to save. Let's go back into Unity. Let's go back to our first person character. We need a couple of things that need to be done here. So we need a ground check. So let's take our ground check. Again, it's just an empty game object. And I'm going to copy and paste that and drag that underneath my first person character. So all this is just an empty game object that I took in the previous video and moved it down so it's at the bottom. Just hit F to zoom. Bottom of the character. So right at the very bottom there. We can call this ground check 1 if we wanted to, because the other one's ground check. So the first person character in the script, we're looking for a reference for ground check. So let's take that ground check object and drag that in. And then ground mask, we're looking for a layer mask, and we're going to add one that's called ground. If you don't have one called ground, you can go to layers and do add layer, and then I just added ground in here. And then anything on my environment, all of my environment objects have a layer mask of ground. So any object that I have in here, all these ramps and whatnot, have a layer mask of ground. So anything that the player can collide with has a layer mask of ground, which will then give the option to ability to jump and then to collide with it. The character controller doesn't need a collider. But one thing we did not do earlier is set the vertical height for the character controller. So this is a sphere, and it's a 1 by 1 sphere. So if I change the height just to 1, that'll work well instead of 2, which is like a capsule. And then I'm going to put my Y value up just a little bit so it doesn't collide exactly with the ground. It'll make it float in the air a little bit. So 0.0, let's do 0.04. Yeah, so that just moves the collider up a little bit. All right, so we're ready to go test. Let's hit Control S, and let's play. All right, so I can look around, I can move around, see what happens when I jump. Okay, so I can jump. A little bit floaty, so it's a little high, so I probably want to change that value of 4 down to lower. But if I jump, I grab it, take a hold of it, it'll pull me down. If I go up a ramp and fall off of it, let's go up a higher ramp. If we go up here to this ramp and fall off, grab it, take a hold of it. So in a lot of first-person point of view games, we can increase some of those values. So basically our speed can be faster. Let's put our jump to 3, so we don't need to float that much. But we can also increase our gravity. So let's do like -20 for our gravity. So it's a faster motion. A lot of first-person point of view games have faster movement in general. So if I fall off something, I fall quicker now. There we go. So if I jump, I fall back down quicker. It's less floating action. Okay. So that's how we can set up a first-person point of view character motion in Unity, which is similar to how we set up from the third-person point of view with the character controller, but now we have it from a first-person point of view. The last thing we can do is actually just turn off the player geometry so we don't have it when we look down to be able to clip and see that. So let's go to the player geometry and then just turn off the set active for that. So that's just a choice if you wanted to see the player body or whatnot, but I don't want to see it right now, so if I look down I don't see the player body, and now it's really a first person point of view looking through the eyes of the character. I can move around, I can jump, gravity takes a hold of this, I can move the mouse around, walk around in different directions wherever the mouse is looking. So that's a fully playable first person point of view character. That'll wrap up this video.